Welcome to the History Forward podcast. I'm Rachel Kulik, Curriculum Officer and Sessional Lecturer. Here, you will get inside stories from recent alumni on their educational journeys and what motivated and shaped their career paths. The purpose of this podcast is to raise awareness of the exciting and diverse careers achieved by undergraduate alumni of historical studies programs as told through their own voices, and to help inspire you to think about who you want to become and the skills you can bring forward. Thank you so much for joining in today. Now, let's talk history. Welcome back to the History Forward podcast. My name is Rachel Kulik, and today I'll be speaking with Rebecca Tunney. Rebecca completed an Honours Bachelor of Science degree at UTM in 2019, majoring in science anthropology, minoring in arts anthropology and classical civilizations. In 2021, she graduated with a Master of Museum Studies degree from UT's Faculty of Information. During that time, she interned with the Aga Khan Museum and the Museums of Mississauga. Rebecca is currently an Information and Loans Technician at the UTM Library. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've already revealed some of this information to our listeners, but what is your connection to the Department of Historical Studies at UTM? Which program did you complete? When did you graduate?
Yeah, so I was in the Classical Civilizations program at UTM. It was one of the minors of my program. And I was, I think, properly in the program, probably around 2017, 2018. And then I graduated in 2019. There's a bit of a story behind that.
Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more. I guess this ties into our second question in terms of if you can tell us a bit more about where you're from and how you ended up coming to study in your historical studies program or at UTM.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've kind of grown up, lived in Mississauga my whole life. And I think maybe the biggest thing to know about me is that I'm quite the generalist. I think there are so many different things that are so interesting to me. And so I've had a lot of different career aspirations over my life. And so I actually originally came to UTM for the forensic science program. So I've always been in anthropology, but it was always my other program that has changed throughout my time at UTM. So I came to UTM for the forensics program. In my first year, I was supposed to take a certain calculus class. They offer different kinds of calculus. I took the wrong one, and I realized it probably too late. So by the time I realized it, the one that I was supposed to have taken had this really long wait list, and there was no way I was going to get into the class. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to take a couple of humanities courses, get my breadth courses out of the way, and then I can continue taking the calculus class next year. So the two courses that I took were classics courses. So one of them was, I think, Greek and Latin and scientific terminology, and classical myth, I believe. I really loved the Percy Jackson books, and so I thought it would be really interesting to learn more. So I took those two courses in my first year, continued on with the forensics program in my second year, realized that that wasn't really what I wanted to do. You know, as much as I was fascinated by it, it wasn't really what I liked studying. So I switched into the earth science program because I grew up really liking collecting rocks and things like that. A year later, also realized that wasn't what I wanted to study either. And so I kind of got to this point, I think around my third year, where I was like, you know, I have my anthropology major, but what else am I going to do? So I remembered how much I genuinely enjoyed taking those classics courses in my first year. And so I thought I might as well continue with them. So I think it was around my third or fourth year that I just started taking a whole bunch more classical civilizations courses, and I really loved them. I had such a great time, and that's kind of my journey with the historical studies program. Oh, and I guess the other thing is that in my final year of study at UTM, I also took a history of religions course. I think it was Museums and Material Religion. Really great course. I had so much fun.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. That sounds like quite a journey to go through in your studies. And I hear you on the collecting rocks. That's wonderful. So you ended up taking a bunch of courses in classical civilizations, but still that was a minor that you had at UTM. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about your studies in classics and how that actually fit with your other program. Was there overlap?
Yeah, I definitely think there was overlap. So I think something that I really loved about a lot of my courses in the classics program were how creative they were, and especially like the professors and how they taught. I remember there was one class where we, as part of like one of our major assignments, we threw like a Roman dinner party, or I don't know if it was quite a symposia, but essentially each group was in charge of one aspect of this dinner party. And so you had to source the materials that would make sense for that time. And then you had to do a presentation about it. And it was so much fun. And it was such an immersive way of getting the class to kind of understand. I think it was a Roman luxury course. So, what does it mean for something to be a luxury? And I think that's another big thing, is that I think when people think about historical studies or even classical civilizations, they think it's just memorizing dates and, being able to tell someone when something happened. But it's not just rote memorization, but really the ability to understand not just what something is, but kind of its importance or the story that it holds. I remember for that same Roman luxury course, we had to go to the Royal Ontario Museum, and we had to write a paper about a vessel and whether or not it would have been considered a luxury good. And so we had to think about, what was the material, what time period did it come from, and would that have been considered a luxury? Well, it depends on who had access to that material, who would have used it. What does this object say about the person who used it? And I think that was really important for my time in the museum studies program, because I've more so focused on kind of the public facing aspects of museums, education, exhibition development, and really how we communicate information with the public. That was really helpful for me to be able to make that kind of analysis and to be able to say, there's this thing in museums called interpretation, and it's really hard to define. But I think the best way that I can describe it is that it's how you communicate an idea to someone. So traditional interpretation at a museum is a little piece of text that says, this is what this is when it's from, this is what it's made out of. But interpretation is becoming a lot more complex than that. And it's, not just a little plaque anymore. It's whether or not you can hold a sample of the object or how you interact with a display. And so being able to put on a display of an object that this is a hairbrush, but this is what it tells us about the people who used it. I think that was easily transferable to the work that I did, especially with the Museums of Mississauga. I was a co-curator in an exhibition there. And so that was really helpful when we were talking about the objects that we put on display. And I think a lot of people don't just want to know the facts about what an object is, but they want to know, why is it important? And I think a lot of those skills I gained from the Classical Civilizations program. Sorry, that was long and circuitous.
That's excellent. No, it's incredibly fascinating. And it's wonderful to hear about how you took some of the things that you learned while you were a student and have now applied them to this role that you have in museums. I was wondering actually if you could elaborate a bit further, tell us a bit further about your current or your museum job role or your current job role and how your studies have influenced or been influential in your career. You spoke a bit already about the interpretation and the communication aspect. Are there other things that you drew from your program in any of these roles that you've had so far post-graduation?
Yeah, so I think another big thing is really the ability to communicate, whether that's in written form or in presentations. A lot of the courses that I took in classics were focused more so on essay writing and presenting information to the class. And so that involves a lot of research. And so right now, I think as you mentioned earlier, I work for the UTM Library as an information and loans technician. And so I get to take everything that I learned from researching in my courses and presenting information in presentations for my classes. And I really get to use that to help other students find the resources that they need to complete their own work. So I'm, at the front desk and someone will say, I don't know how to access this journal. I can show them how to do it because I also know how to do it from my own experience in the classics program. If someone has no idea how to use PowerPoint, for example, then I can, again, pull from my own experience in classes and say, if you go to this tab, you'll be able to find this formatting tool. So I really think in my current role, it's been really helpful to have, the different ways of presenting information and being able to show other students how to do that and support them in their academic journey.
Thank you. That sounds really engaging and exciting to be able to help other students as well. And not just in looking for their own resources, but also in how to use the resources and probably how to communicate themselves. I'm wondering if you could describe a bit more your path about how you began your careers post-graduation. So you've accomplished a number of careers post-graduation so far. You've completed your master's in museum studies, you've interned at museums, and now you're working as the technician at the UTM Library, as you mentioned. So you had a science focus to a sense, but then went into museums, but are also working in resources and communications to an extent. So was this path by chance? Did you network? I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit further.
Yeah, so I always kind of laugh at how non-linear my path has always been. Again, I've just been such a generalist and I just love exploring different things. And I also think that's a big reason why I loved the classics program or even generally the historical studies, because it's so multidisciplinary. And I was really able to study a lot of different things. In some classes, I was studying visual culture, and other classes, we would study literature. And in terms of my path afterwards, I honestly wasn't even sure that I wanted to go to grad school. I think at the end of my undergraduate degree, I was kind of waffling on it. I was actually first intending to go to become a teacher because my whole life I'd been told that you should be a teacher, you would be perfect as a teacher. And I mean, I have every respect in the world for all of the teachers I've ever had. That is such an important job. And I am so grateful to every teacher and professor that I've ever had. I just knew that teaching in a classroom wasn't for me. And so that's kind of why I thought I still wanted to work in education, but maybe in not such a formal capacity. And so I think that's why I went towards museums, is because a lot of museum education is informal. And I think that's definitely the kind of education that's more my speed. And so I applied, I got accepted into the program. I did that for 2 years after my undergrad. And actually, how I came about the UTM library job is because I just kind of saw it on the website. And maybe for a little bit of background, I worked at the UTM library as a student assistant for 4 years as an undergraduate student. So for most of the time that I was an undergrad, I was also working part-time at the UTM library. And so I thought, I really loved that job. I really love supporting students and in their academic endeavors. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to continue doing that while also kind of carrying forward all of the skills that I'd learned in my different programs.
That's fantastic. So you even had another job, a part-time job on top of being a full-time student.
Yes, I
So
did.
incredible. You mentioned that there were already a few courses that you really enjoyed with museums that may have led you towards this path in museums when you did your master's. I was wondering if there was another particular professor or course at UTM that shaped the direction in which you went, or if perhaps you are still inspired but haven't attempted another career yet. Do you foresee any other careers?
Always open to different options. Am I allowed to actually mention two professors? Because there's
Yes,
definitely two that I can think of. So,
please
um,
do.
so in terms of my time in the classical civilizations program, I think a professor who was really, really supportive of the work that I was doing and the kind of the career path that I was taking was Professor Carrie Atkins. I ended up taking a lot of classes with her, but she was always so supportive and really encouraged me to dig deeper into the things that I was interested in and so enthusiastic and creative with her courses. And so I think I am so grateful to have had her as a professor and to have had the opportunity to learn from her. And I think another professor, as I mentioned, I took a history of religions course, which obviously was not one of the programs I was in, but it was a museums and material religion course. And this was around the time that I thought I was going to go into museums. So I took this course with Professor Sarah Richardson. And again, so incredibly supportive. There was a time where I wasn't even sure whether or not it was a good idea to go into museums, whether it would be worth it. And I remember, we'd gone on a field trip to a museum and she was telling me that like I should just go after the thing that I wanted to do. And the thing that I wanted to do was museums. And so, again, incredibly supportive, so creative with the ways that we engaged with the class, and so grateful to have had her as a professor as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Rebecca. It's incredible what support can do, and glad to hear that you felt supported. I wanted to finish up our interview today by asking you if there's any advice that you'd like to share with students considering a historical studies program or courses.
Yeah, so I think two things. One, again, I think a lot of people think about historical studies as just being memorizing dates, and I encourage you to not just see it as that. I think you gain a lot of really important skills that are applicable today, right? It's being able to, look at an image and what is someone trying to get across with this image? What is someone trying to communicate with me through this, not even just historical imagery, but also applying that to images that you see today, or even the words that people use today. That ability to analyze and look past the surface, I think, is so important. And that's definitely something that I gained from the classical civilizations program. And I think the other thing is to remember that you're never alone in this. I think sometimes it can feel scary and overwhelming, whether it's your first time writing a long essay or you're digging deeper into a topic, but you don't know where to start. I always encourage you to first talk to your professors. Your professors and TAs are there to support you. I know some people don't know how to approach their professors, and I think you go to their office hours. You ask them any questions that you have, or if you don't have any questions, ask them about their research or tell them about the things that you're interested in researching. And they can also kind of give you some advice about that. Along those lines of support, come by the UTM library. We have reference and research specialists who can help guide you in the process of doing research for the first time or figuring out how to do citations. The library is here to support the campus, and we are here to support you. So I hope you'll come by sometime.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm glad to hear that the library is open again
Yes.
and look forward to having students back on campus as well. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, and I wish you all the best in your current role and in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode and you know someone who would also enjoy this episode, please pass it on to them or share it with your friends. Like it, click the follow button, or enter your email on the blog to receive podcast updates. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to having you tune in next time to History Forward.